People are really rather afraid that this country might be rather swamped by people with a different culture.
We now had on our hands a generation of young black people who were British and who were not prepared to be as grateful, shall we say, as their parents for the new life that we had afforded them.
I didn't join the police as a racist, but whilst I was in the police, I became one. We just went out and made a beeline for whosoever we wanted to arrest. So you'd say you'd seen them try 2 or 3 car door handles. You'd seen them sizing someone up at a bus stop, and you'd see them put their hand towards a lady's handbag. People had no chance of proving their innocence. Evidence was planted, that was a common practice, and assaulting people was almost a daily occurrence.
We were the occupying army, if you like, and thinking of the people of Brixton as the enemy, that there wasn't a good person amongst them, that they were all criminals, that blackness equated with criminality.
It was a place where young blacks, muggers or thieves or whatever, a place where the police and the blacks were staring at each other, congregated.
I think you'll find that a large, very large proportion of this type of crime is committed by black youths.
Under the surface, there was always a fire smouldering, and it just needed something else to set it off.
What I condoned was a build-up of police because the crime was building up within Brixton area, and it seemed to me and experienced detective officers that a lot of it was emanating from the front line.
It was simply stopping and searching any young black man that happened to move in and around the central Brixton area.
If you knew clearly that blacks were responsible for the greater number of muggings than whites, you would be foolish. You don't have to be a trained officer to know that you would be foolish to go and chase whites rather than blacks.
Quite obviously, in those sort of situations, you are going to catch a lot of innocent people in the net.
It was a warm day, I remember that, because I had just my shirt. Wasn't wearing a tunic, so I was in shirt sleeves, and we had new open collars there. You didn't have to wear a tie. I saw coming towards me from a distance someone running, not towards me, but in my direction. There was a huge hole, huge gap in his back. It was pouring blood. I was then joined by several other black people. I tried to explain, but I mean, I was covered in his blood as well by now. And he managed to get away. A couple of minutes later, I heard on the radio that the van unit had found him and that they were trying to help him. They were trying to help him in the back of the van, and people's perceptions again that they were trying to hurt him. And it escalated from there. On that day, I was part of a team that drove around in a van, and the call came up for urgent assistance. The operators on the radio at Scotland Yard were calling for all available units to make their way there. There were police cars abandoned in a haphazard fashion, maybe 3, 4, 5 or more. We didn't know what to do. There was cops struggling and fighting with people. The police were outnumbered, and this was on a scale that I'd never seen before. We eventually got back in the vehicles. We were all told to leave the area and go back to Brixton. So we did. We got in our vehicles and drove back.
If I'd have withdrawn, a lot of people would have seen that as surrender. And also, it would have laid me open to the charge of failing to police the area properly. It would have been beyond belief to have withdrawn police because somebody said, "Oh, I think you're doing it all wrong." I had a responsibility not only to Riot and Row, but also to the people in Brixton.
The police can only police with the consent of the local community, and where the local community do not consent to the way in which the police operate, then there is going to be trouble.
Saturdays, as a parish priest, my mind would have been concentrating on Palm Sunday the following day, and getting things ready for that.
There were a lot of people there, and I do recall it felt, yeah, there was some tension in the air, but I couldn't put my finger on more than that.
We were hearing police officers screaming, absolutely screaming for assistance. And to be quite honest with you, I had a cold chill that came over me. People were cut off, people were calling for help. So it did start to build up a picture for us before we got there. It was like driving into a ghost town, yes. It was very eerie, very quiet. We could still hear the radio going, so we knew that there were things going on, but we couldn't see it. We were all from different areas, nobody knew each other. But a dozen police officers is quite good, so we thought we were quite competent to hold that road and not let anybody through to the shopping centre, so we were quite jolly and happy. This was our target. Don't let anybody through here into Brixton town. We were going to hold it under all circumstances. I could hear police officers round the other road as well, which sounded like they're under attack. This is when we saw our first rioters. And as we moved up to Rowton Road, that's when these people saw us and we became their targets. I can see the people coming down the road now. Bricks started to rain down. We had no shields. I remember at one stage grabbing hold of a dustbin lid. We were retreating. We were definitely retreating. We had to for our own safety.
The chief superintendent at Brixton phoned me and said, it's getting very ugly down here. Streams of youths, mostly black, running up down the streets and windows have been smashed. And I think you ought to come down. And I said, I couldn't agree more. So I took off my own car and went down there. Burning vehicles, rioters, policemen withdrawing. It was frightening to a certain extent. It was unnerving and it was very sad.
We finally got our shields and people were bringing them up to people in the front line. We came up the road but nobody knew how to use them and we were locked in one line. We became Aunt Sally's. We couldn't move because the idea of a shield is to go forward, to push the crowd back. And I remember being locked up and I remember seeing this bricks coming over and there's nothing I could do. I couldn't bring my shield up to defend myself. I couldn't bring the shield down because it was just locked there. I had traffic officers to one side of me and admin staff that had never seen a shield, women police officers that were not trained in shields those days. So all they were doing were hiding behind their shields, which we really should have gone forward. Eventually, when we unlocked, we went forward. And as we went forward as we should do in groups of 3, but keeping in line. And the faster we went, the faster they ran away. And in the end, we were winning. We were winning Rowton Road. A milk bottle smashed in front of me. So we were a bit worried because milk bottles can injure anyway, and so we sort of stepped back. But then when the next one came on and it hit, you know, what can you do against fire? The petrol bomb was hitting you flat on and the petrol was going underneath the shields and then coming up and burning the foam underneath. People were screaming and shouting and people were setting alight and it was quite horrendous. It was quite horrendous. Not a nice experience. And you could see the ruddy things coming at you as well, that's the thing.
The hostility between the black young people in particular and the Metropolitan Police was something I hadn't encountered before, and I wasn't fully aware of, I must confess, until that night.
I'd only been driving for 2 weeks, just qualified for 2 weeks, so I was really excited being a driver. We just came through a police cordon at Brockwell Park. And just as we got through the first crowd, that's the first indication anything was wrong, because there was a loud bang on the side of the fire engine. I thought I'd hit somebody, and my station officer just turned around to me and said, whatever you do, don't stop, keep going. I think it was a brick that first shattered the windscreen, I'm not sure. And once that was gone, there was no protection for the 2 of us in the front cab, the station officer and myself. We was just fair game from there on in.
This was just 4 miles down the road from the Houses of Parliament. This was a part of London. I'd experienced similar scenes in Northern Ireland. I'd never seen anything like this in a mainland city.
Bricks, glass, paving slab hit me in the chest, and my arm was torn off the steering wheel with something smashing into my left arm. And you can see the anger in their face while they're throwing bricks and bottles, and I was just so terrified.
The police were trying to take over their home, their territory, and that was the last thing they were going to let them do.
Exactly what you're saying, and I appreciate what you've already done.
Where's he going from?
But there is no question, in my decision at the moment, there is no question of withdrawing police from here.
From what I've been told, from the observations I've made myself, that they would have seen this as a victory over the police and they would have never withdrawn.
I just felt that he was wrong, I hoped that he would reflect upon it, and having said what I could at that point, there was nothing much one could now do about it. I went back round the corner again.
I didn't believe what they said. And the attitude of them, the shouting in the background, led me to believe this is this man telling me, but he has no rights justification in saying that they would stand down, so to speak, because I was pretty convinced they wouldn't.
My colleagues were on fire, my colleagues have been injured, so now it's time people got arrested.
I saw the police forming a cordon behind me here, and at a suitable moment I slipped through it and came down to see what was going on. And I found a group of policemen having tea, standing around the corner. They were relaxed, and I was standing around and chatting about this and that. And I suddenly heard one of them say, "What's this bloody rabble?" And I looked round, and I saw a group of pretty rough-looking blokes walking along. One had a pickaxe handle, I remember. And as I looked round, the other policeman next to me said, "Oh, it's all right, they're our bloody rabble." Next, all the street lights went off. Just without any warning at all, the lights all went off. And a few seconds later, there was sounds of shouting and crashing and banging and people getting thumped and people running, coming from down the road here. And soon after that, people started staggering out with blood coming from their heads. Policemen started coming out, dragging people they were arresting. And it was quite a scene of chaos. And then all the lights came on again.
I was asked to go to Effra Parade. But you don't really know what you're facing. You don't know what's going to be there when you get there. You know you're going to be tested. The crowd were really extremely violent. They couldn't care what injuries they caused or even if they killed people. That was quite obvious. I spent a lot of time on the radio just telling the control, if you don't get reinforcements here soon, we'll have the biggest forced funeral we've ever had. The fire brigade said they were going to have to go. It was too bad. And they were sort of pulling their hoses together to go. And I said to the chap, "How do you turn the hose on?" And he said, "You mustn't use our hoses because we will be seen as an ally of the police and will be targeted in the future." And I said, "Well, we've got to use them. We've no choice." It was like an iron bar coming out of it. It was a great jet of water, obviously, you can imagine. And it was horizontal, and we just swept the crowd with it, and it was knocking people over. It was a wonderful feeling. I turned round, and there was the most marvellous sight in the world. There were about, I should think about 50 or 60 officers, all bandbox smart with shields and this sort of stuff. 1 minute you're in the most appalling problems, and within 5 or 6 minutes probably, certainly 10 minutes at the most, everything had died down. I can understand people being offended by the police. I can understand people being threatened by police presence. What I couldn't understand really was the ferocity that took place.
The territory that, they had wanted to preserve and keep from the police was now in ruins, as it were.
The whole world knew that we had lost control of the streets. And that's something that was very difficult to take. The rioters had won the day.
I was very much a doubting Thomas about their claims, but the sheer volume of complaints from people about police behaviour could not be ignored. You could say, yes, some of them are exaggerating. You could say, yes, some of them are making it up. But they couldn't all be exaggerating and making it up. I think it changed our attitudes towards the Black Asian community. And I think it probably made the country as a whole wake up to the fact that there was a problem here which had to be addressed.
It wasn't just locals from Brixton, but others from elsewhere had come to help, and that's why I said it wasn't spontaneous, that it was planned.
The police still wanted to blame a lawless minority amongst the community for what had happened. Anything rather than admit that they had got it seriously wrong.
He came down to have a look round, acquaint himself, see what was going on. Well, there was shouting went on, and one or two people, "Oh, that Willie Whitelaw."
The police have in a very difficult task, and I want to say this again and again. deserve the support of every law-abiding citizen in this country, because this country places on all its citizens that responsibility, because we ask the police to carry out these duties on our behalf.
He never went anywhere near Railton Road. He had a quick whiz around the area with the Metropolitan Commissioner at his side.
It was clear after about 10 minutes that he'd had enough, and he said to me, Mr. Rowland, I think we ought to go back to Brixton Police Station.
Quite clearly, we've got to limit any further mass immigration into this country, and if any people wish to return to their country of ethnic origin, they should be encouraged to do so by the government. I hope it's going to be a very quick inquiry. Lord Scarman will report, and I hope he will be very candid in the recommendations that he makes to government.
Clearly, a large degree of responsibility lay at the door of the police service. The police had got the policing of the local area wrong to the extent that they lost control.
I think a lot of people had some pretty legitimate grievances about the way we went about our business.
The police could not just police an area as they wanted, indiscriminately stopping and searching large numbers of people, for example. The only way to successfully police a community is by consent. It was a nasty jolt to the police, but it took a long time for the smarting to wear off before the police were willing to take on those ideas.